Let's say Wahhabi, Hanafis, Deobandis.
This is fastest question, very easy. Is the Deobandi Bareli different? This, I think 90% of Muslim Ummah, Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah.
It's very difficult to have a conversation on religion, any religion. And it is even more difficult to have a conversation on a religion like Islam that has so many different interpretations. Now, I've tried to have a conversation with an esteemed scholar who runs a fantastic training academy, who went through a spiritual journey where he transformed and understood the message. And I wanted to learn from him and understand what was it that he learned, why did he go through this transformation, and what did he get out of it. And he is a UPenn grad in economics. He started his PhD in NYU, and he's got a fantastic story. You are going to check out the story of Azhar Iqbal. He's the founder of Hidayah Academy, and here is his story. In fact, he ended up founding the Hidayah Academy and is now an Islamic scholar. Azhar Iqbal, how are you today? Walaikum salam. Fascinating story. I want to go back all the way. You studied here, Karachi mein. You grew up here, and then you went to college, to Penn. Most of us had a very different college experience. But what was it about your college experience and thereafter your enrollment in PhD that has put you on such a different journey and trajectory? Because most Penn NYU grads that I know are either bankers, consultants, or they're sitting as CFOs in some company in America, and none of them have come back. But here you are running a religious academy, and that too a very successful one, and you give lectures and bayans all over the world. Walk me through how this happened.
So, back in the 90s, in 1993, I go to the US after doing my A-levels from St. Pat's. So, O-levels, 12 years in city school, 2 years in St. Pat's. And then I go to UPenn, and I spent 3 years there. And I was one of these, A-level guys, just like the normal guys that who are the CFOs of different companies across the world. I was one of them. Even I interviewed for some of these companies,
Yeah.
Interviewed for CS First Boston and Bear Stearns and all of these companies who come to Penn. So I was like that. But a lot of people like me, they do change. I'm not the only one. There could be, I think, if not hundreds of thousands, at least thousands of people who go to universities abroad, and they become older and then think about life, and they choose a path. In choosing your path, then you have to have some sort of, guidance. I was fortunate at Penn. There was a very vibrant Muslim Students Association. So they, they would invite speakers who would be very, very, intelligent and would be at very high posts. So there was a secretary of U.S. President Nixon, who was also a professor at Harvard, and who had accepted Islam. People like that who would come. And then people like me who were, just A-level students from Pakistan and had come, who would not go to any Islamic lecture, they would still come to a lecture like that.
Yeah.
Harvard grad who was a Nixon, secretary.
Yeah, because it's fascinating to meet.
To meet people like that.
Yeah.
So I went to one or two of their lectures, and I figured that, this is something which is good for me. And then I would go to their lectures regularly. This is where the change came. So the change was not obvious. I was not in this attire then.
Right.
But there was an internal change that was going on.
What was that? What was that thought that when you heard these people, these illustrious people come into your college and speak? I want to understand the thought that went through your head, that beginning, that inception of this concept. What was it?
Okay, so there was this one, black lady that they invited. She was the best speaker you could ever imagine. So I had, gone through the top teachers of the world at Wharton and at all of these schools. And then you had this lady come in, and she surpassed everyone else. And she spoke about Islam, and she was an American and all of that. So she had all these qualifications that, people like us would want, somebody to have. And on top of that, she was speaking about, Islam. So she said that one line, I think, and that, was a line that changed me. That was the first step towards change. And she said that, I am an American living in the US, and her name was Salwa Abdullah. So this was her new name when she became Muslim. So she said, I talked to all the scholars that I should name myself Abdullah. So everybody told me that Abdullah is a man's name. It is not a woman's name. So then I said, okay, fine, my name is Salwa Abdullah. But she said, I wanted to name myself Abdullah because I figured that if I become a slave of Allah, then I leave the slavery of everything else. So since I have become a slave of Allah, I have left the slavery of everything else, and this is why I'm happy about who I am. So this one line, was very strong. And I was thinking to myself that, if we do not come into this path, then Allah has other people, that Allah can bring them into this path. So that was, I think, the turning point. And from then onwards, I was more regular in MSA, and I became an MSA member, not a that's not a critique of MSA.
Yeah.
So then I became so by my third and final year, so I spent 3 years at Penn. So I was like an MSA member. Then I also became, the president of the Pakistan Society. So obviously, Pakistan Society and MSA were very close that year.
So I was the president of the Pakistan Society, and I turned out very different.
Yeah.
And yes, we used to have the jointness, but there would also be a lot of conflict because you'd have a very liberal group of Pakistanis, but most of the MSA members were not as liberal. So there would be that challenge. There would always be that fight.
So it's just like, how if you have there's an analogy. If you have a religious type of leader in a country, then he'll be very active in the OIC. And if you have a liberal leader, then he will not care about OIC. So it's a similar thing at a university level, actually. So, this is how it.
So then you joined the MSA, you got involved in the Muslim Students Association, that community.
They would have lectures, and they would have prayer time. They would have all these, they would have aloo paratha nights, and they would have all of these things. So it became a community. So this is the community I identified myself with. I enjoyed it. And the previous 2 years that I was not involved with them, those 2 years, I thought this year was the best, as
Right.
in terms of having fun, in terms of in terms of being at peace, and in terms of even studies,
Right.
So I thought this is the right path for me. And I had come to the conclusion that one has to be close to the one who has created you. So this is how it was. So there was no outward change, but internally I associated myself with
With this community.
with this community.
And I understand, and I had a lot of friends who were very active in my college, in the MSA, in the PSL. And, once college ended, everyone just kind of went their own way. They got busy with their fancy little jobs in New York, wherever else they ended up. And they went off on their various different paths. But somehow you didn't. You kind of held on to this, and it evolved. How did that happen?
So from UPenn, I went to NYU.
Which is, you're moving even more liberal. Yet, that's what's fascinating to me,
And by the way, I went to NYU after about 30 years, last month.
Right.
Not last month, but in October. So I took my wife and my 3.5-year-old son to NYU just to see my campus. At NYU, I had become even more religious, even outwardly.
Right.
And they would ask me to lead Jummah prayers and all of that. So this time I went to the Bopes library, my economics department, and also I went to the the masjid where I used to lead the Jummah prayers. So what happened was at NYU, I had still not changed outwardly, but I was looking for that same community that I had at Penn. So there was as soon as I came to New York, there was a dinner hosted by the MSAs of NYU and Columbia University. So Columbia, NYU was downtown Manhattan, Columbia was uptown.
Exactly.
So all the students of, MSAs of Columbia and NYU gathered, and we had a meeting, and I met with a friend, a person who was very impressive to me, and who was doing his master's in international relations, from Columbia. So he said to me that, we sat down, we were both the only graduate students, they were all undergraduates. So we sat down, we talked about Islam, and we talked about religion and all of that, and became good friends. And then he would, visit us, and I would visit him. His name was Kamaluddin Ahmed, and he was the son of Rafiuddin Ahmed. Rafiuddin Ahmed was, he was at UN. He was the Pakistan representative at UN. So we became friends, and I met his father and all of that. So he was a very religious, very nice person. And he introduced me to a scholar he would visit from Pakistan. His name was Shaykh Azhar Iqbal. And I used to go to in his company, and he would speak, and he had, he was amazing in terms of speaking, and in terms of his character, and in terms of all of these other things, that would make anybody, impressed. So I would go in his company. He would come, maybe a couple of times from Pakistan, visit, and he would speak at different, religious institutions, at masajids and, at madaris in the US. And so I became very close to the Sheikh, So the thing was that the change came because of this strong company, a strong bond that I developed with the scholars. And then the Sheikh advised me that I should start the Alim course. It's an 8-year course, and they were starting it in upstate New York, and that was the place that the Sheikh would come, and that was the Sheikh's masjid, and I would visit the Sheikh there. It was about an hour away from NYU, so I decided, okay, then let me just do the Alim course there, and let me do the PhD here, and let me just live around the area, and I can go to both places. It was easy, so I did that. And I started the Alim course, and I did the first 5 year of that course in the US.
First 5 years.
First 5 years.
And this is while you're doing your PhD.
And this is actually, initially it was while doing the PhD, but then I started my job. In those times, voice over IP was very new. Yes. And one of the first companies was Net2Phone. I don't know if you've heard.
Yes, I remember that.
And they offered me a job. So I worked with them for 2 years there, and then the company, dissolved. Right. So I started working actually in the US. So it was my work, and the work was actually closer to, to the masjid and to the community that I was living. Right. So I would do the Alim course, and I would be working there. So if you hear in the Haram, you hear after the Fatiha, right? But in Pakistan, if you go to any masjid, it's after Fatiha. You don't hear the loud Ameen, right? Now, Imam Shafi's fatwa is that you should say Ameen loudly. Imam Abu Hanifa's fatwa is that you should say Ameen quietly. Now, for a general, person, for general public, this does not mean anything. This should not mean anything. It's a scholarly difference of opinion. And the scholarly difference of opinion is that there are ahadiths about both saying Ameen out aloud and saying Ameen quietly. So which one to choose is, how you make your ruling, So Imam Shafi had made a rule for himself that the more I find hadith about a certain thing, that is the ruling I will choose. So there are more hadiths about saying Ameen out loudly. So this is Imam Shafi's position. Imam Abu Hanifa's position is that, I will take, my ruling is based on that part of the life of the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, which is closer to his death, because that is the most refined, version of Islam. So the hadiths about being quiet are towards the end of the life of the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Right. So now he is on his view that, Ameen should be should be quiet.
And they're both probably right.
And they're both probably right. And there's so these scholars themselves also tell people that this difference of opinion is a scholarly difference of opinion, and people have, nothing to, general public has nothing to do with it.
But the general public gets
What should the general public do?
Yes, because they get very excited by these things, right?
Yeah.
By these differences, and they got caught up in the semantics of it.
Yeah. So now what general public does is they just follow whatever the people around them are doing. So in Pakistan, you will not say Ameen out loudly. You will just say Ameen quietly because everybody else is doing this, and this is fine. This is a correct position. And if you're in Egypt, where people follow Imam Shafi, then you will say Ameen out loud. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, that this is the Imam being followed in Saudi. So people in Saudi will say Ameen loudly,
Right.
So it's fine. So person sitting here cannot say that he is wrong. Or person sitting there cannot say that he is wrong. The Pakistani is wrong because he's not saying Ameen loudly.
Right.
So 90% of difference is this difference, which should not be a difference.
So it's a very sort of high level scholarly difference.
And there is scholarly debate always going on about, between scholars, and, which is fine.
So do the scholars all of them get along, and do they have open debate about these various topics?
Yeah, in different forms. There's Rabta Alam-e-Islam. OIC has a section where scholars have, they meet and they talk about these things. Within Pakistan, there's different schools of thoughts. They also have discussions at different levels. There are discussions going on at scholarly level. If these discussions they happen, that's fine. Now, because this era is the era of social media, and people who are not exposed to the scholarly fatwas of other scholars, now they're being exposed to this. So then they say that, so that means I should be saying Ameen loudly, and then to support their the saying out Ameen loudly to support this viewpoint, you see Haram. And then, Haram is on the TV all the time. It's on your internet all the time. And you see everybody saying out loudly. So then, why can't I say this in my masjid in Karachi? And that is why these questions have arisen more in these times as opposed to in any other time of history. So 90% of differences are these types of differences, and these are easy differences. Then there's other differences.
What's a hard difference? Like that, let's say, is one that is really hard to resolve between the various sects.
Yeah, the one that actually is a hard one is, so this is 90% of Islam. There's the difference, just like the Ahmadiyya sect, they said that our head is is a prophet after the prophet. Now, this is where,
that's a big difference.
Very draw the line, this is just going against he's going against 1400 years of Islamic scholarship. And if there's a group who says this, then there is going to be, a sort of conflict that you don't agree to this, and we will not let this, go on or whatever, So this is a serious.
So that's okay. That's a really hard one. So somewhere in between, what would be something that's not as hard?
So the greatest hit in Pakistan is the greatest hit of differences is the Deobandi Bareilly difference.
What is that? Walk me through that.
And they're both from the Hanafi school of.
So how many schools of thought are there? First,
there's 4 schools.
There's 4 primary schools of thought.
So there's the Hanafi school,
right?
The Shafi school, the Maliki school, Imam Malik, and then there's the Hanbali school, Imam Ahmad.
And this is all under the Sunni.
These are all Sunni schools.
These are all Sunni schools. 90% of the, let's say, the village,
or 85%.
Or 85% of the village. So the four schools under the Sunnis. Then under the Shiite thinking or following or that community, are there different?
There's different schools. So, the Agha Khanis are under the Shia school of thought, and the Bohris are under the Shia school of thought. The 12 Imams are the Shia school of thought. So
that becomes a whole different sort of line of thinking.
Yeah.
Right?
So that's another line of thinking.
Okay. So then we're going to stick to the Sunni line of thinking. And within the Sunni, where does the Wahhabi...
So then within the Sunnis, the Wahhabi movement also came. They said, okay, these 4 Imams So these four imams are very settled, in terms of, the South Asia and Afghanistan area and Turkey and parts of Syria. This was all Hanafi. And Egypt and areas, in East Africa were Shafi'i. And then West Africa was all Maliki. And Saudi area was all Hanbali. So this was all settled, this is how people are.
So it was based on regions.
Based on regions.
And based on the actual, let's say the scholar living in that region.
That area, because all of them are right. All of them came to the conclusion through Quran and Hadith, but different interpretations of Quran.
And different points in time?
Around within a century and a half. Let's put it that way.
So around 700, let's say 750 AD.
Yeah. So let me just put it.
And these four scholars that you mentioned, I just want to go into this. Yeah. These four scholars were actually physically living in four different areas of this, let's say, Middle East, Africa, South Asia.
Yeah, exactly. So Imam Abu Hanifa was in Persia.
Right.
And he had two students, Imam Muhammad and Imam Abu Yusuf, who were his famous students. And Imam Shafi was a student of Imam Muhammad, rahimahullah. So his teacher was, Hanafi Shaykh, and also many different scholars. And Imam Malik was also one of the teachers of Imam Shafi, rahimahullah. Imam Shafi traveled from his area all the way to Medina Munawwara. Imam Malik used to live in Medina Munawwara. So Imam Malik was a completely different school of thought. His view was that whatever was in Quran and Hadith, and if I have to choose, because in terms of, if there is, if there's Hadith about saying Ameen out loudly and Ameen not out loudly, if both types of Hadith are present, then I will take the opinion of the practice of the people of Medina Munawwara. So whatever they're doing.
Oh, really? So it's not even the text.
So the text is there.
But the practice takes precedence.
But yeah, if you have to choose from the text, then he would look at the practice of the people.
So
this was his viewpoint.
So each person is essentially applying their own reasoning to come to a conclusion based on the facts and how they interpret it in their region that they're living in.
Only on that scripture where there's room for
interpretation.
An interpretation, exactly.
So got it. So now within the Sunni sect, you've got the four schools of thought. At around within the same time frame. Four different parts of the world. And that's where all of the differences originated from.
Right.
And so within that, how does the Wahhabi, Deobandi, Barelvi?
Okay, so Wahhabi movement, Deobandi and Barelvi, they all started around the same time when, the British invaded India.
Wait, so that's a big. We were in 700.
So all these.
Now you're moving to 1,000 years later.
1,000 years later, yeah. So this is 200 years, or maybe 300.
So this is very recent.
Very recent, yeah. And so Sheikh Abdul Wahab, the founder of the Wahhabi movement, his viewpoint was that, these are the four schools and these are all settled down. There could be, still room for interpretation. So they are not that different. It's again, compared to the Ahmadiyya and compared to the difference that the Sunni community holds.
Right.
Shias, this is a softer difference. His only viewpoint was that, I still have a chance of interpreting
what's already been interpreted.
So,
and this was, what year was this? Around
1800s.
1800s. Because if you look at Christianity's history, it went through similar breakup. It basically had sort of the core 3 or 4 schools of thought all the way up until the 1560, until I think there was the Crusades. And then the differences kind of increased after that, right? So what was it that led to this point? Why suddenly in the 1800s was there a desire to open up interpretation even further? Because it seems like from 700 on to, let's say, 80 for 1,000 years, it seemed to have been working okay.
Yeah.
What was the trigger event? What was the change event that led to, this particular new interpretation to kick in?
My feeling is that, different people say that there was some event that led to this, when you go about, when you look at things that people say to each other, so they blame that, a certain sector was out of the British Empire.
Right. Okay.
They did this, but I think it was just a scholarly interpretation. Different scholars interpreted the scriptures differently. And just Shaykh Abdullah thought that, that I also still have room to interpret, the differences, or places where you can interpret differently. I still have room. And most of his rulings are, very close to the Shafi'i Muslim, actually.
Okay.
So again, it's not that big of a difference.
Right.
The difference between the Deobandis and Barelvis is a South Asian phenomenon. And this difference is also not that much in terms of fiqh. Both of them are Hanafi, so there's no difference. In terms of practice, in terms of, if you see, the actions of the Masajid, they will be pretty much the same. The only difference is that, and there's a scholar in our times who has put this in very aptly, I would say, that they're both the same, actually.
Right.
But they so the Barelvi school of thought, they believe that the love for the Prophet ﷺ should be shown very openly. And if you go beyond the boundaries what have been laid down in the Quran and Hadith to show your love, they feel that it is still part of Islam. And Deobandis are a little stricter in this sense. They say that, if you go beyond the boundaries of what have been laid down, even to show this love for the Blessed Messenger, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, then, there is some sort of cap on. And they feel, the Barelvis, in showing love, there should not be any cap. You can show your love in whatever way that you want to show love. So, the Barelvis would say that, when it's the time for the birth of the Messenger, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, you should light up the houses, and all of these things, and you should, and some even say you should cut a cake, and you should show this happiness and all of that. And the Deobandis on the other side, this is just one example. They would say that, there's no, proof of doing all of these things in the scriptures. So we cannot make this as a fard or as an event for everyone.
Right.
If he wants to do it, that's fine. So he doesn't want to do it, that's fine.
Right.
So it is more of this. Otherwise, the difference is, again, not that much.
Because they're within the same school of thought, right?
Yeah. But, if you are a person living in Pakistan, you would see this difference as the major difference in the world. But if you look at it from the scholarly point of view, I think it is one of the most minor differences, because the fiqh is the same.
The fiqh is the same.
They would still both say that we are the followers of Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, and that's it. So
I find that, and the reason I ask is because I've, had the opportunity to sort of travel our region, not just South Asia, but also the Middle East, and experience the religion in different parts of the Middle East. And they seem, in different parts of the Middle East, it's a way of life, right? It's inbuilt into life. In fact, I will give you a great example. I was stuck in traffic with a Jordanian, and he's in the traffic. He was stuck. It was one of the days that it was a huge downpour came in Jeddah. This was about a year ago. And we were stuck, I think, for about 8 hours. It was actually just flooded everywhere and whatever. So there were 2 prayer times that came in, Asr and Maghrib, and he's in the car. And he's like, oh, it's prayer time. What should I do? Okay, nothing. You know what? And he just starts praying. Now he's praying and he's driving. Right? Because we're in traffic, suddenly the car in front moves. So he just presses the accelerator, adjusts the steering, moves a few inches forward, continues praying. And I'm looking at him and I'm like, I would have never seen this in Pakistan. And we finished. He did the same thing for Maghrib. And I asked him, I said, I've never seen this way of practicing religion where I come from. He's like, why? It was prayer time, I prayed. Like it was like not a non-issue. You know, it was what was the reason? It was time to pray. We're in this situation. I can't get out. There's water everywhere. So you know what? To pray, I prayed. You know, I find that it's far more practical. There isn't a lot of focus on what you said, the celebratory moments and events. It's more functional. It's more about the community and it's more about the self. And then you move on with your life. You know, why is it different for South Asia?
Okay, let me just tell you this. This is also a difference of opinion, actually. So, your friend probably follows Imam Shafi.
Yeah, because
Because he's an Arab. So,
yes.
So Imam Shafi says that you can pray your Fard's prayers on your sawari, on your whatever car or whatever mode of transport that you're using. Imam Abu Hanifa says that no, if it's fard, if it's nafil prayers, then you can do it on on the back of your camel or on the back of your car or whatever. There's fard prayer, you have to get down and you have to do it on the side. So it's just a difference of opinion. So in this instance, it seems that their life is easier, convenient, comfortable, and closer to reality. But there are some opinions of Imam Shafi that you will feel that those are difficult to follow, and Hanifas are easier. For example, so Imam Shafi says that if you are in a state of wuzu, and if you happen to touch a woman, even by mistake, your wuzu is gone. Now, people living in the U.S., you go to the grocery store, and there's a girl who's your money is giving his bagging. She gives you the bag, and you touch her, and your wuzu's gone. Now you have to go back home and make wuzu never in the masjid.
That's not practical.
Yeah, and here we in Pakistan, we go for Fajr prayers, we kiss our wives, and we go for Fajr prayers. And that's completely fine,
Right.
So it's easier, practical,
Yeah.
So there's pros and cons on both sides, I think.
So
Some people some people tell me that, why can't we just choose from each one of them and
choose what works for us, because everyone seems to have a different view. Why can't we mix and match and make what
So
works?
now there's I will not say a movement, but now there's a voice coming out that, we should be allowed at least to choose from all these four.
Yeah.
Now that the world is one global village, before.
So there is actually a discussion on.
So there's a discussion.
Because I'll tell you why.
The scholars.
Because I'll tell you why. You see, with social media, you're only going to polarize people because you are shown more of what you see.
Yeah.
Right? So if you're only seeing, let's say, school of thought 1, you will continue, the algorithms continue feeding that to you, so they keep you on the platform. So which means that your knowledge or your understanding or your belief only deepens within one function.
Exactly.
Right? You're not going lateral. So how do you move laterally? How do you think openly? And how do you interpret openly? That becomes a challenge. And for me, another big area which I find it's bigger in South Asia, I don't know if it's as big, is this whole concept of Islamic finance.
Yeah.
There seems to be there is a movement. Most banks here have moved towards an Islamic banking approach.
Yeah.
But in the Middle East, I don't see the word Islamic banking. I just see banking. Why is there such a big movement around finance? And you come from, let's say, a background that can understand and appreciate this.
Yeah.
Why is that here and not there as much?
Actually, it is there. It is everywhere.
It is everywhere.
It is.
But yet our branding seems to be more in your face.
Because our people are, I think it's there. It's in Malaysia, it's in Indonesia, it's in Pakistan, it's in Dubai, and in some ways, Qatar and Saudi, they lead these movements, and most of the conferences for Islamic finance, I'm close to the pioneer of Islamic banking in Pakistan. Fatih Usmani, Daman Barakatuh, he's a very big sheikh of our era, and he is the pioneer of this Islamic banking. So most of the visits he does is to the Saudi, capital, and so I think it's everywhere, but it's more here because we are more in numbers, actually, and there are more banks, and there's more fanfare here, and whatever is done in.
Yeah,
it is celebrated.
So we like to celebrate.
So it's So it's more visible here. But Islamic finance is there. And Islamic finance, the theoretical framework is sound. And a lot of people ask this question that, it's just the same. You go on the bank is, the same.
It's just paperwork.
The app is the same. The debit card is the same. And, all of these things. But I say, oh, you don't get the credit card in Islamic bank, do you?
Yeah.
I don't get the credit card.
Yeah.
There's a difference. But the difference is, the theoretical framework is such that they've tried to match the conventional bank, and which is fine. So a very good example the scholars give is, Burger King in Pakistan and Burger King in UK, you will have the same taste, you will even have the same environment. But Burger King in Pakistan is halal and Burger King in the UK is actually not halal.
Yeah.
Although the environment and the taste and the burger is still the same.
So a non-Islamic bank is non-halal. Tell me one thing that Islamic banking protects an individual from that traditional banking does not.
Well, the main aim of Islamic banking is to protect the individual from riba, from interest.
But riba is always high interest. If interest is inflation, then technically it's not interest, right? It's basically an adjustment for increases in cost of living that take place every year anyway.
So this difference of opinion, I think, does not have much to do with Islamic banking that is going on now. But this is another point that the scholars are discussing these days, especially, when the Supreme Court gave this ruling that all of interest in Pakistan is not legal anymore. This was the ruling last year in June. And all the banks, they gathered with the Ministry of Finance, and the Sheikh was invited, and I also happened to be here, and they discussed all these points. But in terms of the validity of the Islamic bank, this is not a point of, a question of concern. The question of concern is, how do you make, something which is so similar to conventional bank, how does this become
Islamic and halal? Yeah.
So they have their framework.
Right.
So what happens is that, if a person asks for a loan at a bank, if he has a good standing and he has some, backing and he has assets, the loan, the bank gives him the loan. In Islamic bank, the Islamic bank is not going to give you a loan like this. You have to explain to them, what do you want? And let's say if you say, I want to buy this house. So in papers, what is going to happen is that the Islamic bank is going to buy that house itself because the bank has the money. And it says that, okay, now you buy it back from me and I will make small installments. Plus, you will also pay rent for me for living in this house. Now that amount, what the bank does is it matches with the repayment plan of the conventional bank. So that in both these things, in terms of what the person pays back to the bank is the same. But one is Islamic and one is, one doesn't have riba and one has riba in it, So the framework of Islamic, this is it's much more complicated.
No, I'm sure, because as you're saying it, my mind is actually going towards decentralized finance and tokenization and the blockchain, because I think that's where Islamic banking can actually really thrive, because you can actually tokenize and solve half of the interest-related challenges by putting items and objects on the blockchain or assets and then just break them up into little pieces and divide them out. And they're available to anyone, anywhere around the world.
Exactly. So it opens up a lot of avenues. So in the theoretical framework, I think more or less the scholars have that it is, it is fine. It is halal. The practical application is still a question. A lot of banks are not able to practically apply that framework.
Right.
So that's another thing. But otherwise, it is a very good means of coming out of haram into the halal world of finance.
Can religions evolve? Because if a message is a core message that has been delivered, and this is all monotheistic religions, right, and their history, they evolve because the people evolve with time, right? And so the message, which it should stay to be the core message, but because the people, the communities are evolving, can the religion evolve with them? Because the world that we live in today is not the world that, let's say, that gave birth to Christianity, let's say 2,000, years ago, or gave birth to Islam, let's say 1,400 years ago, or gave birth to Judaism, which was even older than that. In this world of today, with all the technology that we have, with the connectivity that we had, where I can put on a VR goggle and feel like I am in that place, can I do a remote Hajj, Can these concepts evolve in your opinion and in the teachings you've come across? How does the younger, more technologically savvy generation or technologically independent generation start thinking about these scriptures?
I think in terms of the core message, obviously the religion cannot evolve. The core message will stand. The religion does not stop us from using technology. So technology is fine. But there will be a difference of opinion as to what is the extent of the evolution of the religion. So if somebody, we're sitting here, we're talking about religion, this will not have happened maybe 10 years ago even.
Right.
So this is a proof that the religion is evolving in some sort, in some degree. But the question that you said, okay, can I sit here, wear this, whatever that?
Yeah, the Oculus or the Apple, what is that?
The Apple, whatever new gadget.
$3,000 device that cracks.
And do my Hajj sitting in Karachi. So this is something that the scholars will definitely.
No, and I'm saying this from a person with disabilities, right? Someone who has a physical disability, cannot move, someone who's too old, but wants that experience, does, you know what I mean? Like, can this be permitted then?
So it will be permitted to let him have a view of the place, and he can show his love for the place. He can have the feeling of being in that place. But I think at this point, the scholars would say that, uska Hajj to nahi hua. He hasn't performed the Hajj. He will actually physically will have to go to the place. But I think there are different shadows of evolution, and some of those will be easy to, accept, and some of those will be difficult to accept. And this is how it has been going on. My parents and my elders tell me that when the mic came, the electric mic, there was a huge debate, should we use it in the masajid or not? And it went on for many decades before everybody agreed that you could use the speaker and the mic in the masjid.
And that's going to be, I'd say, my last question. It's when you choose a life like this, and especially someone with your background who could afford to travel overseas, study overseas, so you came from a certain background that could afford a certain lifestyle, and that could afford this option where you could give up your work and you could go down this path, right? A lot of people don't have that luxury. How do they maintain a lifestyle? How do they afford a living if they want to go down this path?
So our motto in Hidayah Academy is that this sort of scholarship you can have with your jobs, with your businesses, with your...
So you keep your life going?
So that is why I do my own business. I have this and I have 3 different businesses that I run, and I'm actively running them.
So the business life, your work life, you continue. This is something that you do, let's say,
on the weekends.
On the weekends, in the evenings, and so on.
There's sacrifice.
Yes.
Generally people just do business or just do work, and they come back home and it's their time. People like,
Or some people do business and play golf. You don't play golf. You practice and, spend time with your community.
I spend time with the community, and then I enjoy it also.
Yeah. So of course you do enjoy it. So, yeah.
So, my brother, he enjoys playing golf.
Yeah.
I enjoy going to Hidayah Academy, meeting these people.
Right.
That, or, going to, giving a lecture at a university or all of that.
Yeah.
So I like that as well.
No, I appreciate you taking the time. I've been wanting to have this conversation, and I feel like we've only scratched the surface. It's difficult to have a conversation on religion in this country because people can interpret things very differently.
Exactly.
But I think that, it's important to try for people to have an understanding and to be able to ask open-ended questions and have honest debate about different topics, and understand that, there are different schools of thought.
Yeah.
there are going to be differences in thinking. And as long as we can all get along, and as long as we understand what the core message is and we believe in that message, and then it's fine. But I thank you for the time, especially in Ramzan, to come in and have this conversation. It was an honor for me. And I wish you all the best for the Hidayah Academy and for great success ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. It was also an honor for me to come here and speak to you and meet such a great person like yourself.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Stay tuned to more DigiTales. Please like and subscribe below. We have great more episodes coming up next. Bye-bye.